To continue with our introduction, we will move on to Marxism and what it means, particularly with reference to this course. So, Marxist criticism in its diverse forms grounds its theory and practice on the economic and cultural theory of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Marxist theory especially states that the evolving history of humankind, of its social groupings and relations, of its institutions and of its ways of thinking are largely determined by the changing modes of its material production or its overall economic organization for producing and distributing material goods. The Marxists believe that it is not the consciousness of men that determines their being, but their social being that determines their consciousness. So, Dr. Vimal Mohan John will be your instructor for Marxism. He will explain the construct and concepts of Marx, key concepts related to the Marxist theory, especially dialectical materialism, economic determinism. He will also talk about Das Kapital, and then he will move on to Lucas and the novel and socialist realism, concepts of ideology, Louis Althusser, Antonio Gramsci, and his concept of and his theory of hegemony. You will also be introduced to the Frankfurt School, especially that is related to Theodor Adorno and Walter Benjamin. As you all know, the Frankfurt School of German Marxists, and the major names associated with this theory are Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. So, Sigmund Freud's writings on the unconscious mind were a defining moment for art and literature. The interpretation of dreams dealt with psychological complexity and the ideas of the fragmentation of the self. In dream work, the author describes how dream content or images of dream are in reality the codes of latent dream content or dream thoughts. Freud uses the terms condensation and displacement, where the former is the process where dream content contains multiple association, while the latter suggests the shift where the real subject of a narrative is outside the story. Freud's most controversial concept, the Oedipus complex, is the notion that every child sexually desires a parent and wishes to be rid of its rival, that is the other parent. Implicit in this is the theory of art and literature. Freud used the well-known example of Hamlet, who is so swift in killing Polonius, and also Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is hesitant to kill Claudius. Freud's explanation here is that unconsciously Hamlet too had desired his father's death, and while striking at Claudius, he would be striking himself. Controversial theory, but nevertheless something that has influenced literature in a very major way. You will also be introduced to the theories of Jacques Lacan. Jacques Lacan's lectures were published as the 4 fundamental concepts of psychoanalysis, and the key concepts in Lacan are phallocentric, mirror stage, and the symbolic. Lacan identifies 3 main phases in the development of the child: the real, the imaginary, and the symbolic. He also draws on Freud's theory of the Oedipus complex, where the infant passes through the seduction and primal and castration phases. You will also be introduced to the theories of Laura Mulvey and Zizek here. Next, we will move on to gender and queer theory. Dr. Vimal John will introduce you to the key concepts of this theory. You will be introduced to Simone de Beauvoir and her The Second Sex, a seminal work of feminist criticism published in 1949. Many of Beauvoir's ideas, you must know this, such as the right to abortion and use of contraception for women, were elaborated later on by Kate Millett in her Sexual Politics. The Beauvoir's book also examines several myths, stereotypes and literary works and shows how these texts have helped to uphold misogynist and patriarchal ideals. Another key name in gender theory, especially in feminist theory, is Betty Friedan and her The Feminine Mystique. The Feminine Mystique was published in 1963 and it grew out of a survey of college graduates this survey was conducted by Betty Friedan. The female respondents revealed their unhappiness with problems that did not have specific names. We are talking about an era where a lot of things were still unresolved. They still are, but they were not able to exactly name the problems that they were facing. Friedan also wrote an article about her findings, and interestingly in those days, especially during the 50s, it was rejected by all the editors who received it. Friedan decided to rework and expand the article into a book, and that book was The Feminine Mystique, which explored the role of women in post-war industrial societies, and in particular the role of full-time homemaker. The book also attacked the popular notion that women could only find fulfillment through childbearing and housework. Friedan located her analysis in post-war middle-class suburban communities. In this lecture, you will also become familiar with the theories and ideas of Ellen Sizou, Laura Mulvey and Julie Kristeva. Another key author and her concept of gynocriticism, I am talking about Ellen Showalter, and gynocriticism which is associated with Ellen Showalter. So, gynocriticism essentially refers to a shift in feminist attention away from the readings of male writers' misrepresentation of women and towards the more historical study of women writers in terms of their notions of patriarchy. The recovery of a till then neglected tradition of women's writing and analyzing those features of women's experience historically undervalued by the predominantly male critics. Well-known works of the 70s in this category include Ellen Showalter's A Literature of Their Own and Sandra Gilbert and Susan Guber's The Mad Woman in the Attic. You will also become familiar with Virginia Woolf and her A Room of Her Own, which was published in 1929, where Woolf spoke out for women's liberation. In the first part of the book, Woolf's narrator visits Oxbridge, a fictional university college, and as she walks around the grounds contemplating the relations between women and fiction, she is brusquely shooed off the grass by the college beadle, since only male scholars are permitted on the lawn. Having lost her train of thought, the narrator subsequently decides to visit the library. Upon opening the door, however, she is asked to leave by the librarian, who insists that women cannot enter unaccompanied. Woolf's ideas are very accessible, and the point she tries to make is very simple. That is, if a woman is to write, she needs a stable income and a private room. And at this level, she anticipates French feminists' discussion of écriture féminine, female writing, écriture féminine. Another influential work of this theory is by Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gerber and their The Mad Woman in the Attic, which was published in 1979. So, this work alludes to Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, which was published in 1847, and also to its hero Mr. Rochester, who has a so called mad wife locked up in the attic. Those of you who have read the novel, you know we are talking about Bertha. So, for Gilbert and Gerber, Bertha Rochester is an embodiment of two characters. She is the oppressed woman of history who was declared mad when she rebelled. At another level, Bertha is also the raging protest that Jane has been suppressing like a man, all her life rendering her a eunuch, at least symbolically. Gilbert and Gerber's work has far-reaching implications because it privileges women academicians to reread works by and on women. The post-structuralist feminist attention to language and materiality, which has given rise to a renewed concern for the maternal, has also provoked an extended debate over the meanings of gender and sexual difference. For example, Teresa DeLaurentis and her work Technologies of Gender, and here she asserts that sexual difference constrains feminist critical thought within the conceptual frame of a universal sex opposition, which makes it difficult, if not impossible, to articulate difference among and within women. DeLaurentis prefers to privilege the term gender, which for her is not only a classificatory term in grammar, but also a representation of a relation that is ongoing social construction. In this lecture, you will also gain familiarity with the concepts of rational and liberal feminism, performativity by especially this is a term given by Judith Butler and her Gender Trouble, and theories of masculinity and queerness. Here I would conduct a small quiz, and here are the questions that you should be attempting. So, please take a close look at this particular slide. Question 1, define irony. Question 2, give an example of allegory. Question 3, who are the critics associated with the Frankfurt School? Who is the author of Renaissance self-fashioning from Moore to Shakespeare? So, what is meant by new historicism? Well, to have something like new historicism, we have to have historicism as well. So, therefore, here I have written on the board historicism and new historicism. Now, new historicism is a general term given to a wide variety of theories and methodologies that are historicist in origin. New historicism is generally regarded as one of the most accessible of recent critical theories. One key influence on new historicism is Nietzsche's, Friedrich Nietzsche's, the German thinker Nietzsche, his work on the uses and disadvantages of history for life. You can make a note of it, on the uses and disadvantages of history for life, where he urges us to employ the strength to break up and dissolve a part of the past. Now, these are heavy ideas, and I would suggest that you please take a look at Nietzsche's work, which is freely available on the internet. So, you can take a look at it on the uses and disadvantages of history for life. It will take perhaps multiple readings for you to understand the gist of what he is trying to do, but there are plenty of resources available which explain the gist of the essay and gist of that particular writing, and you should be able to understand and apply it to historicism and the concepts of new historicism. Now, new historicism also has Marxist leanings and is also informed by certain aspects of post-structuralism. So, post-structuralism is another theory that we will be looking at in this course. The new historicists tend to question labels and titles. Okay, they do not take things at the face value. They constantly interrogate the relationship between history and literature rather than making blanket assertions. New historicism is associated with research being conducted in two periods. This is particularly true in the research that is being conducted in the English speaking world. So, they focus their attention on the Renaissance and the Romantic period, and in the same vein, one of the most influential new historicist interpretation is to read Stephen Greenblatt's work on Shakespeare's The Tempest. I have already mentioned that how influential Stephen Greenblatt is for the entire theory of an entire discussion on the new historicism. So, here Greenblatt offers a subversive critique of imperialism and ennobles Caliban. Now, I am sure that you remember who Caliban was. He is one of those darker spirits that is enslaved by Shakespeare, by Prospero in The Tempest, and as opposed to Ariel, the so called good spirit. And Caliban's protest is that the island that is now ruled by Prospero originally belonged to him and his mother. So, that is Greenblatt's interpretation of the play, that how Caliban is the colonized and Prospero becomes the white colonizer. So, new historicism assumes that historical phenomena can be read like a text. These are important terms: textuality, histories, and these terms are very important in the entire theory of and entire discussion of new historicism. Now, this interest in theory, it owes much to the works of the anthropologist Clifford Geertz, for whom local knowledge is a readable cultural practice. So, local knowledge of a particular place, and he gives example of the Balinese cockfight, and he says that this kind of a cultural practice gives us a good introduction to local knowledge. Now, key figures and key personalities associated with new historicist theory: Jerome McGann, Marjorie Levinson, Marilyn Butler, and H. Aram Wieser. So, Dr. Vimal John, when he does this lecture with you, he is going to talk in detail about these figures. We will also be doing eco-criticism in this course, and Dr. Vimal Mohan John will be handling that area. What is eco-criticism? Now, we know what is ecology, and we also know what is ecofeminism, we know what is eco-friendliness. We come across these terms very often. So, eco-criticism as it now exists in the English speaking world, particularly in the USA, it takes literary bearings from three major 19th century American writers whose works celebrate nature and nature as the life force, the life giving force, and the wilderness as manifested in America. So, who are these writers? Ralph Waldo Emerson, Margaret Fuller, and Henry David Thoreau. Now, those who are interested in literature, particularly those who have a background in English literature, they would know these people as the transcendentalists, Emerson, Fuller, and Thoreau. So, they were the people who influenced the way studies of eco-criticism is done. So, we all know they were all members of a group of New England writers, essayists, and philosophers. Collectively, they were called the Transcendentalists. Transcendentalism was the first major literary movement in America to achieve cultural importance, cultural impact that the natural world had. For Emerson, it was important that the American writers achieve independence from European models, and one of his first books, it was a short book, it was called Nature, which was a reflective essay on the impact that the natural world had on him. At this point, I would like to draw your attention to this particular passage from Henry David Thoreau's classic book, Walden. I will read out this rather lengthy passage for you, and perhaps this will give you a clue into what the origins and how this entire theory of eco-criticism started. So, the origins of eco-literature, eco-criticism, and interest in it. So, here I go, quoting from Thoreau's Walden. The scenery of Walden is on a humble scale, and though very beautiful, does not approach to grandeur, nor can it much concern one who has not long frequented it or lived by its shore. Yet this pond is so remarkable for its depth and purity as to merit a particular description. It is a clear and deep green well, half a mile long and a mile and 3/4 in circumference, and contains about 61.5 acres, a perennial spring in the midst of pine and oak woods, without any visible inlet or outlet except by the clouds and evaporation. He goes on, the surrounding hills rise abruptly from the water to the height of 40 to 80 feet, though on the southeast and east they attain to about 100 and 150 feet respectively within a quarter and a third of a mile. They are exclusively woodland. All our Concord waters have two colors at least, one when viewed at a distance and another more proper close at hand. The first depends more on the light and follows the sky. In clear weather, in summer, they appear blue at a little distance, especially if agitated, and at a great distance all appear alike. In stormy weather, they are sometimes of a dark slate color. So, what are we looking at? Immense reverence for nature, immense interest in nature and this great desire to become one with everything that is everything that surrounds us. So, that is what the philosophy of the transcendentalists was all about, and Henry David Thoreau, as you know, he actually practiced what he taught, and he built himself a life in the wilderness, and that is all that has been immortalized in his great book Walden. Yeah. So, having talked about eco-criticism, let us move on to two joint lectures that I will be doing with Dr. Vimal Mohan John. So, the first one is on post-structuralism. Now, here we will be considering the writings of Derrida, Michel Foucault, Jacques Lacan, Baudrillard, Kristeva, and Roland Barthes. We will also give you an overview of Umberto Eco's The Open work, and we will get familiar with things, with concepts such as deconstruction, which is so important to the study of post-structuralism, to the post-structuralist thought. Now, what is post-structuralism? Let me give you a very quick overview and understanding of what is meant by this theory called post-structuralism. So, this theory posits that meaning is inherently unstable, whereas a structuralist would believe that an explanation is conceivable. Okay, so, that is the major difference. Post-structuralism believe that meaning for a text is inherently unstable, whereas structuralists believe that it is possible. So, the main aspect of post-structuralist theory used in literary practice is deconstruction. I have already told you this is a concept associated with Jacques Derrida, and another key figure of post-structuralism is Julia Kristeva. So, Kristeva in her great book La Révolution de langage poétique, she discusses the relationship between the ordinary and rational and the heterogeneous irrational, between the conscious and the unconscious, and the normal and the poetic. Okay. So, these are the writers we will be looking at. We will also get an understanding of Derrida's of grammatology, the concept of difference, and also understand the key ideas as given by Paul Damon and Hillis Miller. The next joint lecture is on post-colonialism. We will be introduced to the theories of Frantz Fanon, Edward Said, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, Homi Bhabha, Chinua Achebe. We will be getting familiar with the concepts of subaltern, liminality and hybridity. We will give you an overview of The Wretched of the Earth, that is Fanon's work, and Said's Orientalism. I suggest that you read the first opening pages from Edward Said's Orientalism. We will also acquire an understanding of Bill Ashcraft's The Empire Writes Back and what is meant by colonial mimicry. So, that is about it. The last chapter, the last lecture for this course would be post theory, and then we will have conclusion. So, I have just tried to give you an overview of what this course is going to entail, what we have got to offer you. We will be giving you regular assignments and quizzes, and we would like you to be very prompt in your submission of the assignments and quizzes online. As you know, there will be a proctored exam conducted at the end of the course, and once you have cleared all this, you will be given a certificate for this course. So, I look forward to having you with me on this course. So, Dr. Vimal Mohan John, and I welcome you for this course. So, the next lecture would be on key concepts in literary theory and literary criticism. See you then. Thank you so much.